Hi everyone, welcome. I'm about to check in on my bin of mixed red worms. And this bin of mixed red worms is now 92 days of age. In this system, we've been following this so-called ping-pong style of feeding. And the last time we came in here, I did a little scribble-scratch diagram to show what was fed where and how long that stuff had been in each of those sides of the bin. And I decided, well, I even hinted at it during the last video, that I might make a digital version of it. Because then it'll just always calculate what today's day is and what the day was when any of these feedings occurred. Then it'll tell us immediately how much time has passed since certain feedings were put in here. So the 92-day indicator for today, the 9th feeding, is showing us that we're going to be feeding on this side of the bin today. And then on that side, we're going to be able to check in how the leftovers from all these different types of stems are holding up after 22 days. Over on the opposite side, from only 10 days ago when we last fed, we put pineapple in there, which is a pretty slow composting food. Some of these older things, such as the first 2 feedings that went down the middle, as well as the first ping pong feeding over on this side, consisted of stuff that we didn't really expect to see many leftovers of. And it was over here, I think, that we sort of started getting the idea to use somewhat slower composting things that we thought might leave leftovers. And I could see a little typo, or maybe it's just a glitch in the size of the cell in the spreadsheet or something, but I'm gonna have to fix that there. Because this is the side of the bin where we put the customary label for the container. But this basically shows what's been fed in each corner and how much time has transpired since that stuff was put into each of those corners. So each time we come in here, I'll be able to print out a fresh copy of that, which will automatically update. And after we put today's feeding in, I'll update it to replace the label of to be determined with what we're feeding today. And what we're feeding today is very similar to what it got on this side 2 feedings ago, which was pumpkin, including the pumpkin stem, because guess what? I got more of it, and they're going to get another stem. So seemingly repetitive, I know. I don't mind. It's okay. I just hacked up a couple pumpkins yesterday, and I extracted all the seeds with which I'm going to make worm chow. And I threw the little bits of pumpkin that I hacked up into the freezer so that we got an abundant supply of yummy worm food. A worm food that they really enjoy, pumpkin. So this is where we last fed. I don't have a replacement feeding zone indicator, so when we're done, we'll just use this to indicate where we last fed over on this side. But before we open up that side to apply today's feeding and see how those leftovers are holding out, why don't we check the last feeding that we applied, which was the pineapple. Pineapple, which some people would consider a forbidden food in a worm bin since it's technically a citrus. And even though it's kind of a juicy thing, perhaps the fact that it is citrus might be enough reason to get the worms to kind of avoid it for a while. So I think that was the part of the reason we sort of classified it as a good candidate for this ping pong feeding, if what we're after is stuff that's going to possibly stick around for a while, so that on numerous check-in occasions we can come back and see how the worms are doing on this stuff. So even if they've not really taken a shine to the vegetable matter itself, or the fruit in this case, I guess, the worms do seem to enjoy the moisture content left behind, or that's been emitted by the pineapple. And I must say, there's a really nice, pleasant odor or scent. I guess when it's not pleasant, you would call it an odor. Perhaps when it is a little bit pleasant, you would consider it as a scent. In this case, I would consider it a scent because it's actually quite pleasant to smell the pineapple in here. And I've unearthed a good bit of it. As you can see, we're pretty generous with this stuff. A lot of this is most of it is just the bits and pieces of the pineapple that are discarded and not eaten because they are just a little bit too a little bit too fibrous and tough. So another interesting thing that was added in here, and you might have noticed it earlier, was the little spheres of corn cob, and here's one of them. Look how the worms are in and out of that hollow of the corn cob sphere. I believe that in previous check-ins we did manage to bump into a few of them. Here's another one. I think we only bumped into 4 of them, despite our best effort to try to track more of them down. I couldn't really recall how many of them had been placed down into this side of the bin, but to have found 4 of them that one time seemed like it was a pretty good score. And if we don't bump into 4 of them today, that would be understandable, since it was a little bit difficult to track those 4 down the last time. We did actually manage to find 4 of them. But we don't have to spend much time in this side of the bin, because this isn't really what we're after today. We are definitely curious to see how things are coming along with regards to the previous feedings that have been applied to this side of the bin, but we're here to give them today's feeding, and that's really the main event. So, well, I don't know. I'm not even sure it's accurate to classify one thing or another as the main event in a setup like this, because some people might have a bias towards some particular past feeding and consider that as the more interesting thing to be checked in on. I'm always definitely curious to see how these little corn cob spheres are coming along. Not that they're going to be any different from any other corn cob bit, which we all know, I think, is just a slow food. Anytime you put corn cob into a worm bin, it's fair to expect that it's going to take quite some time to break down. I just figured since these are a little bit smaller, they might not take so long. And they just seemed interesting because of the unusual round shape that they took when I was trying to grind them up, but I ended up really just forming them into little spheres in my blender. They just wouldn't shred, so I put them aside. And I actually still have a good assortment of them right here. They look just like this when we put them in there. And I believe that this might be the only place we've made any use of them so far. So let's restore this feeding area. Wow, okay. Popular item. Yeah, you know, I don't think that they're all that discouraged by the pineapple. They're in it and they're eating it. So even if it is, in fact, you know, a citrus, as is clearly this piece of lime over here, which, again, the worms don't seem to mind much. Most people equate citrus stuff with being acidic, and most people would assume that acidic stuff is not a worm-friendly item. Here's another one of our little corn cob bits. So we've now found 3 in the process. Perhaps we'll bump into another one as we restore stuff into the feeding zone. This might be more lemon or lime peel. So that was kind of cool to be able to bump into 3 of the corn cob spheres. They're going to be in here for a while, so, you know, perhaps in future check-ins we'll find 3 again. Oh, here's the 4th one, so we actually found all 4 of them once again. Perhaps 4 was all that we put in there, because on no occasion have I found any more than 4. Not that there have been many occasions for us to come back and look for them, but so far I'm kind of thinking maybe 4 was the number of corn cob spheres that we fed when we fed them. So maybe one of these days I'll go back to the video just to get a reality check on what the real number was. But I think we can kind of skip the middle, because the middle section was only fed during feedings number 1 and 2, which at this point, feeding number 1 was actually on the day of the system's launch, 92 days ago, and then the next one was 12 days later, which was 80 days ago. So to find leftovers of those first 2 feedings is very unlikely. Perhaps in future check-ins we'll do some tilling up of the middle section of the bin, but I think we did that pretty recently, and I think we could just skip it this time. So we're bumping into some of the slow composting items that we expected to find in here. And the main things that we had put on this side of the system, were pumpkin stem, as I mentioned earlier. And we already saw some of these pepper stems too. And they're breaking down quite nicely, I must say. I wasn't quite sure what to expect from them, but they might not last quite as long as I thought they would. And we might even find a few more. I wouldn't be surprised if we did. Let's rummage around a little bit and see what we see. There's a good bit of moisture in here now. I guess banana must have come into play along the... Yeah, okay, that's what it was. Besides pepper stems, there was also banana. I need to keep refreshing my my memory on what was put in here. Not just banana stems, but banana peel too, of which we're seeing a little bit of leftover there. But yeah, good bit of moisture down in here. I wondered if we'd be needing to supplement moisture in here, but you know what? As soon as we put these chunks of pumpkin in here, pumpkin is pretty juicy, and especially if you freeze it the way this stuff has been frozen, as it thaws, it's going to emit a good bit of moisture. So I'm not worried about moisture. In fact, maybe I'm worried about too much moisture at this point, you know? So I'm kind of glad that part of the stuff I bought down here is simply dry paper. And I even thought about using this big piece of used top covering newspaper from a system that I just bought to an end, and I no longer need it for that purpose, and it's dry. It's an entire sheet of newspaper. So I'm thinking that this might be the perfect foundation for today's feeding, since it will help absorb some of the moisture that's coming in with this feeding. So why don't we double it up and rest it in here, and then we can start piling in today's feeding. And for that matter, you know, why don't we put these down here too? Paper towels are definitely definitely an awesome substance if what you're interested in is absorbing moisture. And this one's also either paper towel or napkin or something like that. I can't tell for sure, but let's also put that right there on the bottom, so any moisture coming out of this stuff can sort of get caught up right there in the paper. And I think that in itself will make the paper extremely tempting for the worms to want to come in and start nibbling on. And that's a pretty generous pile of food right there. I wasn't quite sure when I was pulling it out of the freezer how much it would end up being, but I think we've given them quite a generous feeding. And it's kind of nice too, you know, you don't feel like you're going overboard because the previous feeding was over there, and they can keep working on this, they can come start working on this, but when we come back to feed next time, this will remain untouched. We'll go to the other side to feed. So it does almost feel like you can almost increase the frequency at which feedings occur when you keep changing the feeding location, because it doesn't feel like you're coming right back in and piling more food on top of the old food. It feels like you're kind of checking out the old food, the pineapple in this case, and then just going to the far other end of the bin to give them the new stuff. So I don't worry too much, especially since only 10 days have passed since the last time we fed. I knew for sure we'd find leftovers, so I think we've got pretty much all the stuff that we dug up as far as leftovers go. And before we top this thing off and cover it up, I've got my pulverized eggshell. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of that in as grit for these little guys. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. And then we can backfill the feeding area and we're finished. Oh, another pepper stem. Oh, and I guess tomato stems right there too. Forgot about those. I guess we're not going to be doing the one thing that I thought I might do, which would be to just include the diagram as supplementary bedding in the feeding area. But you know what we could do is we could just include it as supplementary top covering paper, because even though those top covering pieces of newspaper have been holding up quite nicely, as has this feeding zone indicator, there is always that chance that by the next time we come in here, these won't be in such good shape, and that we'll just reuse them as bedding down in the feeding area. You can already see some pretty good sized holes developing in here. And by the next time we come in here, maybe those pieces of paper will be ripe for being repurposed as bedding. So perhaps right there on top we can leave a little calling card of what we did here today. Whether or not it's going to be legible next time or not, I guess remains to be seen. So let's cover up and call it a day. Oh, looks like we had a little stranded worm out here on the plastic. Usually I try to pay close attention to not let that happen, because I worry that a little worm out here under the bright lights is going to not like being there and end up out on my dry paper tablecloth or something, and that just wouldn't do them any good. So I'll take a quick look around just to make sure we've not ended up with any worms that have reacted to the light by being left out there and cruised off into a dangerous spot somewhere on the table. But I'll take care of doing that after the camera shuts off. But before I go, really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.